A friend asked me over dinner whether the airdrop stuff had made me any money. I said yes, probably, and moved the conversation along before he could ask a second question. Then I went home and spent most of a weekend trying to prove it. 4 wallets, 3 networks, 14 months of activity, and by Sunday night I still had nothing I would have defended to anybody. I knew what had come in. Every claim, roughly what it was worth on the day, what I did with it afterwards. That half was easy because I had told people about it. The other half of the sum did not exist anywhere. The direction the guess always goes. Ask anybody in this hobby how they are doing, and the answer comes back cheerful. They are not lying to you. The memory just files the two halves in different places. The good days are events. A claim lands, you tell somebody, you can name the week it happened in. The costs are not events. $1.40 here, $6 there, 400 times over, each one too small. At the moment it leaves to be worth writing down. And nobody counts the hours. Nobody. So the wins get stored as stories, the cost gets stored nowhere, and the guess comes out wrong, in the same direction every single time. Why I am the one saying this. I run mobile proxy lines and a rack of Android phones for a living. Real SIMs on real carriers, hardware in a room that needs its own fan. A SIM is about $10 a month. A modem depreciates at roughly $1.50 a month over its useful life. A powered hub carrying 30 ports is $150, and the machine everything plugs into was $200. I know those to the dollar because I have to. A line I cannot cost is a line I might be selling below cost for a year without noticing. None of that comes from discipline. An invoice arrives every month, whether I want it or not, and something in me insists on reconciling it. On chain there is no invoice, nothing arrives. The money leaves in fragments from 30 different places at hours when you had stopped watching, and no piece of paper ever adds it up on your behalf. That is the whole difference between a business I can price and a hobby I could not. What one row has to contain? A record that works is boring, and it is the same 6 things every time. The date, the actual day, not the month, because value moves inside a week, and you will want to look it up later. Which wallet? By whatever name you really use for it, as long as that name still means something to you in a year. Which network? Because the same action costs different money on different chains, and comparison is most of the point. What it was for, in your own words. 5 or 6 of them is plenty. The fee you paid and the token you paid it in, and what that fee was worth in real money at the moment you paid it. The field everybody skips. That last one is the one people leave out, and leaving it out quietly ruins everything above it. Here is what it looks like when it goes wrong. You write down 0.004 of some token. 11 months later, you open the sheet. Was that $2 or 9? You have no idea. Neither does the sheet. The token you pay fees in moves. That is the only certain thing about it. So a fee recorded as a token amount is a quantity sitting there waiting for a price you no longer have. And you cannot honestly go back and fill it in. You would need the price of that token at that hour on that day. And by the time you go looking, the free sources give you a daily close, and the ones with real history want a subscription. So you write it at the time. It takes 4 seconds. The chain remembers everything except why. People assume the explorer is the record. It gets you about halfway and then stops. An explorer will hand you every transaction ever sent from an address, with a timestamp, a fee, and a status. That part is complete and it is free. What it cannot give you is intent. A transfer from your wallet 12 to your wallet 19 looks identical to a transfer from your wallet 12 to a stranger. One is housekeeping. The other is you disposing of something you owned. You know which is which on the day it happens. In March, you are looking at a hash and guessing. Failed transactions are the same problem in a smaller package. The chain records that it failed and that you were charged anyway. The chain has no view on whether you meant to do it, whether you got it right on the second attempt 10 minutes later, or whether that fee was simply the price of finding out. So the intent has to come from you, and it has to be written at the time, because it is the one part of the record that exists nowhere else in the world. In, out, and the noise in between. There is a simpler version of the sum that most people never do. 2 numbers. What you put in from outside, and what you took back out to outside. Money that arrived from a bank or an exchange purchase is in. Money that left back to a bank or an exchange and became spendable is out. Everything happening between those 2 points is internal movement, and internal movement is where all the confidence comes from, and none of the answer. 30 wallets shuffling value between themselves feels enormously productive. It moves the top line by nothing. So keep those two figures on their own tab and update them the same day they happen, because there are usually fewer than 20 of them a year, and they are the only entries that cannot be reconstructed wrong. The tool you will actually open, there is proper software for this. Some of it is good, and at 5 or 10 wallets, it does most of the work. I have started with the sophisticated option twice and dropped it twice, both times within a month, both times for the same reason. It wanted connecting, then confirming, then categorizing, and it turned a 15-minute job into an evening I kept postponing. What survived is a spreadsheet with 6 columns, opened on a Sunday, filled in from the week's transactions while I can still remember what any of them were for. 15 minutes. Some weeks less, because some weeks I did nothing worth recording. The better tool beats the spreadsheet on every measure except the one that decides it, which is whether the thing gets opened at all. You cannot backfill, so start today. The instinct when you finally decide to do this is to go back and capture the last 2 years first. Do not. You will spend a fortnight on it. The values you assign will be guesses dressed as data. And most people give up in month 4 and never start the going forward part. Draw a line at today. Everything before it is a fog, and you accept that. Everything after it is recorded properly. Within 3 months, you have enough real rows to see what a wallet costs you per month. And that is the number you were actually after. The cost nobody puts in the sheet. There is a 7th column I never kept and probably should have. Time. Think about what one evening of this genuinely contains. Reading a thread to work out whether a thing is worth doing. Bridging. Waiting for the bridge. Checking it arrived. Doing the actual thing. Checking again the next morning because you did not quite trust it. Call it 3 hours a week, which for anybody honest is on the low side. Across a year, that is 150 hours. I am not going to tell you what your hour is worth. I do not know your situation. What I will say is that the moment you write any number in that box, the arithmetic on the rest of the sheet changes, and sometimes it changes completely, which is probably why nobody writes one. The part I am not qualified to talk about, records matter for tax too, and I am going to be careful here because I am not an accountant and none of this is tax advice. The rules differ by country. How a claim is treated when you receive it, whether swapping one token for another counts as an event, what happens when you move value between 2 wallets you own, all of that varies and it changes, and the people who handle it for a living are paid to keep up. What I can say, without going near advice, is this. Somebody with no records cannot comply with a rule even when they badly want to. If the answer turns out to be that you own nothing at all, you still have to be able to show the working. And reconstructing 3 years across 30 wallets, from explorers and memory, in the fortnight before a deadline is a far worse job than 15 minutes on a Sunday. I watched somebody do the reconstruction version once. It ate most of his month, and he was not confident in the result at the end of it. For I got wrong. For about 9 months, my own sheet had 5 columns instead of 6. I logged the fee as a token amount and left the value blank, because at the time, it felt like something I could look up whenever I got round to it. I cannot look it up, not to a standard I would defend in front of anybody. So that whole first stretch of my own record is a list of quantities I can no longer price, which makes it decoration. And the fog covers exactly the period I was most active, most curious, and running the most wallets. The hours are the second one, and I still do not track them properly. I tell myself it is because they are awkward to measure. The honest reason is that I have a rough idea what the number would say, what the sheet usually tells people. Here is the part that stops people starting. Most people who begin tracking this properly discover the activity was underwater. The fees were bigger than remembered, the claims smaller, and the hours were never in the calculation at all. That is information. It does not make you a mug, and it is not an argument for having avoided finding out. A number you dislike is worth more than a feeling you cannot check, because the number can be acted on. You can stop the lane that never paid, keep the 2 that did, and cut the wallet count back until the fees stop eating the position. And the sheet is the only thing that can tell you which lane was which, because it breaks down by network and by purpose. That is what those columns were for. The people who find they are ahead get the more useful version of the same answer. It is almost never spread evenly. One or two things carried the entire result, and everything else was noise, and the only way to know which is to have written it down while it was happening. The disclaimer meant literally, I am not going to tell you what any token will be worth, or that any of this pays, or which projects deserve your time and which are trying to take your money. I do not know. Anybody who tells you they do is selling you something. What I can tell you is that the cost side is knowable, and it is knowable at the moment it happens rather than 3 years afterwards when it has become archaeology. It is the half of this you actually control. The sheet, the columns in it, and the full write-ups behind all of it are there. Everything is at airdropfarming.org. Subscribe for more on airdrop farming.